Hi, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and you should be prepared to be utterly charmed by Chillow. Chillow is May 2023's Lola's Choice design. Lola's Choice is my small knitted kit club, and many of you who are watching this video are members of the club and have just gotten a very exciting kit in the mail. Some of you might be watching this video later if you decide to knit Chillow on your own. I'll give you links below to my club, to the pattern itself, and anything else I think you need to know as we go through this video together. One thing I do think that you should know is that this is a companion video to the pattern. It doesn't stand alone, so you will need to have the pattern to follow along to understand everything that I am telling you. I'm so excited to tell you about Chillow. I am wearing one of the versions of Chillow here around my neck. Chillow is a necklace that starts with a teardrop pendant and has stitches cast onto each side of the teardrop pendant and worked up and around the neck, and then it is clasped at the back of your neck. I use two different sizes of beads in Chillow, size 8 beads and some Japanese bugle beads that I've not worked with before in knitting a jewelry design, and I'll show those to you under the camera in a second. But the first thing I want to do, or to tell you, which I'm totally excited about, is that Chillow actually has two versions, and I'm going to show those to you under the camera so you understand the difference between the two. So over here, right here, I have version 1, also called Chillaxing Cheetah. And if you picture a cheetah just kind of chilling out by the water, lazing around, strong and powerful, that is version 1 to me. It is easy to knit, definitely easier than version 2, which I'll tell you about in a second. After you do the cast on and the first 6 rows, which happen to be the same on both collars, then you work with beads that are slipped in front of stitches. And you'll see there's this really cool kind of undulation of beads, and that is created by slipping up more or less beads on each row. And obviously the pattern tells you how many beads to slip up. So that's version 1, also Chillaxing Cheetah. Version 2 we like to call Chasing Cheetah, and I'll show you why they got these funny cheetah names later. Version 2, otherwise known as Chasing Cheetah, is a bit more elaborate. I use my favorite beaded double-sided lace technique, alternating with slipped beads. The result is intricate and graceful, kind of like a leaping, chasing cheetah, or that's what we tell ourselves anyway. So beads are worked on yarn overs. This is double-sided lace, which I've used in patterns in the past. This is for people who are confident lace netters or up for a little bit more of a challenge. But if you're somebody who likes to kind of just have ease and grace, I would totally suggest starting with Chillaxing Cheetah, or the version number 1 of this pattern. So now that you understand the two different versions that you can make of Chillow collar, I want to jump in and show you all about the materials. All right, if you were in May 2023's Lola's Choice, your Chillow collar kit came in this utterly adorable little cheetah travel case for your purse or travel needs. It's a little bit padded on the inside, and it's just so freaking cute. And that cheetah on the cover of your case is how we kind of got those cheetah names. Inside your kit, you're gonna have 25 yards of Valdani pearl cotton thread. This is a size 5 pearl cotton thread. It is hand dyed in Romania, and I absolutely adore it. This is a new to me pearl cotton yarn. Valdani does a lot of really high-end, gorgeous embroidery flosses, and I stumbled across their line of embroidery flosses and was like, what do you have that I could use for knitting? And they turned me on to this size 5, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's got a great sheen to it. It is lovely to knit with, and their colors are absolutely stunning. The other things in your kit are a dental floss threader for pre-stringing on your beads. And then there is a bead bag. And inside your bead bag, there are a few different things. One thing that there is this hammered teardrop. It's a metal teardrop that you'll be using as the base pendant. And then inside the bag, the easiest thing that I can do here is just to pour everything out and hope I don't get it all over the rock as I do that. You will have some size 8 seed beads. These size 8 seed beads have about 40 beads to the gram. You have more than 180 in your kit. 180 is what you need for making the collar. And then you have some of these really cool 2.7 by 12 millimeter twisted bugle beads. And these are a new to me bead as well. I've never worked with these in a design before, and they work really well with the size 8 beads. And then the other thing that you have, and that is a little bit buried right now, but I can get it out, I can do this, is a hook and eye clasp that coordinates with your teardrop, and that is for closing your collar when you are done knitting it. So the Valdani floss, if you ever run across it in a store, will be wrapped somewhat like this. It'll come in balls that look like this. Because I was winding off so much yarn for you all for the club, I ended up being able to get it on cones. And when they sold it to me on the cones, they were like, we never even knew we could get it on cones this big. They're huge and gorgeous. And you can kind of see how stunning that is underneath the camera, this big cone. So this is what I have left over. I'm gonna do something fun with this at some point. So the other materials that you'll need to look for at home, you'll need a pair of sharp scissors. You'll need a US size 1, which is about a 2.25, not about, it is actually a 2.25 millimeter needle. You will need a few pieces of scrap yarn or some stitch markers that open and close, like a removable stitch marker, and then a crochet hook that is about 2 millimeters, probably like in the 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter range for casting on stitches onto your teardrop. So the first thing I want to talk to you about a little bit is gauge and sizing, and then we will jump right in with casting on. All right, let's quickly talk about gauge and how adjustable the sizing is for Chillow. So I give you gauge in the pattern as 6 rows of the unbeaded strand blocked. If you've knit a fair number of my patterns, I would say you can just cast on for Chillow and use the needle size that you would typically use for one of my patterns. Like I knit really loosely, so I always use one needle size smaller than I write my patterns for. And I know some of you knit more tightly than me and you use like 2 needle sizes bigger. So I would say go ahead and start with a needle that you feel comfortable using for your gauge. And then after you've worked a few rows, you'll know very quickly if your fabric seems really, really loose, you might want to stop and go down a needle size. And if your fabric seems very tight, you might want to stop and go up a needle size. If you want to check, you can work the unbeaded strand, which is rows 17 and 18 in the Chillaxing Chillow. You can work that unbeaded strand and work a few rows of it and then block it and see if you're getting about 6 rows per inch. And that would be your way of checking gauge. In terms of the adjustability of this size, after you work the beaded portion in both version 1 and version 2, the way that you adjust the size is just by working that plain unbeaded strap or strand at the end. So if you like a necklace that is shorter and more of like a tighter collar around your neck, then that's what I did with my Chillaxing Cheetah. I worked those ends quite a lot shorter. Sorry, I'm losing my words there. I worked them shorter so that I could have something fitting right around here in that like kind of princess spot right here. That looks so good with a V-neck shirt. I really love that. If you're someone who wears tunics like I'm wearing now, you might find that you want your necklace to be a little bit longer like I did with my Chasing Cheetah. That I made those strands on the end much longer longer so that it would hang down more. You could even go longer than this if you know you like a necklace that like hangs really long and hangs right around here. That is the place that you adjust after you're done with the beading, and you just work rows, and that is all written out for you in the pattern. So now that you understand a bit about gauge and sizing, I think it's time for us to jump right in with some knitting. All right, before you get knitting, you need to pre-string beads onto your yarn. What's really fun about these two designs is they use the exact same bead count, so it will be same for both of them. So if you string on your beads and you think that you're making Chasing Cheetah and then you change your mind and you want to make the Chillaxing Cheetah, you are totally fine. You're not going to have to take your beads off of your yarn. The other thing that I have you do is string on the beads for all of your collar at the beginning. So when you finish the first half of the collar, you will still have beads on your yarn for the second half. So don't freak out that you still have beads on your yarn when you finish that first half. You've just got all of them on there in the beginning, so you don't have to worry about doing that again. If you have never pre-strung beads onto your yarn before, it is super easy. I have a second video for that. There is one thing that I want to show you. What you'll be doing is using your dental floss threader and bringing your yarn through, giving yourself a nice long tail. And then as the pattern has you string on beads, it'll say string on, like, I think it says 30A and then 3B. The A beads are the seed beads. So those are those smaller round beads that are the A beads. And then the B bead is the bugle bead. Do you see how easy I made that? And then I talk about slipping up B or A in the pattern, and that helps you make sure that you are on track with the pattern and that you're following things directly, and also that you have strung your beads on correctly. So as you string your beads on your yarn, it's worth stopping and making sure that you got 30A and 3B. Just double check your stringing before you really dive into doing things so that you don't end up having to cut your yarn and fix your stringing. All right, I'll give you that link below if you haven't strung on beads before and you want to learn more about doing that. The next thing that we're going to do is cast onto that teardrop so you can get knitting your Chillow. Okay, it is time to cast on and start making your Chillow collar. What's pretty cool about this design is that the cast on and first 6 rows are the same no matter which version you're making. So the first thing that you're going to do is make a slip knot, leaving yourself a little bit of a tail, and then take that slip knot and put it onto your crochet hook. This is about a 2mm crochet hook. Now the mistake that I make sometimes at this point is to make my slip knot really tight, and then it makes it hard to get that first stitch on. So I keep that a little bit loose. And then I pick up my teardrop so that the point is pointing to the left and the round part is to the right. And you can see that I have my crochet hook running parallel to the teardrop, and it is on top of the teardrop. And now what I'm going to do is dip down, with the crochet hook inside the teardrop, and I am going to grab my yarn and pull it up, and I'll be showing that to you again. And now I'm going to wrap my yarn around the crochet hook and then pull that through both stitches. And you are going to do this 6 times total. So now this is my second time. And now this is my third time where I'm dipping down, grabbing the yarn, wrapping it around, and pulling it through. And I'm going to do that 6 times total. At first, when you're doing this, it might take a little bit to get comfortable. If you have knit my design Fetish before or Chronos before, this is the exact same technique that I use in those 2 patterns. And let me count here because that'll show you the counting piece. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Excellent. And you'll see I kind of moved down my teardrop right there because it was a little easier to work down that way. And I can just slide my stitches up towards the top because that's where they'll be on your necklace. And now what you're going to do is make that last loop a little bit bigger and turn your work around. You can keep that loop on your hook or not. It's going to end up going on your needle. And then what you're going to do is pick up and knit one stitch into each of those loops going down. And you can do that with your knitting needle, but I actually find it easier to do with the hook and then put a few stitches at a time onto your needle. So I'm going to work it like that so you can see what I mean. So I'm going to go down and go underneath both loops of that first crocheted stitch and grab my yarn and pull it through. And then I'm going to go into that next spot right there, and I am going to wrap my yarn around and pull it through. And once I have a few stitches on there, I might just kind of pinch underneath so that those stitches aren't going anywhere. And then I can grab my needle and put them through those stitches. And now you can continue with your needle or you can continue with your hook. I wanted to show you with the needle in case you're doing it with your needle. Some people do not love a crochet hook and they want to put it down as soon as humanly possible. So I'm going to go underneath both those stitches right there, grab the yarn and pull it through. And the trick here is to try to get this to be a little bit tight. So you don't want things to be too loose. And I'll show you a trick at the end if you need to tighten things up. So I'm just going down, I'm wrapping the yarn around, and that one's being a little difficult. So what I'll show you is how to do it with a crochet hook if it's being difficult. I'm going to go underneath those stitches, grab the yarn, bring up that loop, and then just put that loop onto my needle. And now I've got one more to do, and let's do that with the crochet hook again. I'm going to go down, grab the yarn, pull it up, and pull it through. And that is nice. And, oh, I missed one. Let's go back. I'm gonna go in there. You're supposed to have 7 stitches at the end. So if you notice that you don't have 7, that's when you'll go back. So now I've got 6 and now I've got my last one. It's kind of fun when the teacher makes a mistake. There's the 7th stitch. There we go. And now if I look back, I've got 7. If you find that some of your first stitches are looser than you would like them to be, what you can do is kind of pull up on these stitches and tighten up the first one and go down so that they're all nice and tight. And once you've done that, you are all cast on and ready to start your beading. So let's go ahead and do that next. All right, so the first 6 rows of your pattern are same for both version 1 and version 2. They are super easy to work, and this is where you learn how to slip up beads if you've never done this before. Some of you have done this a few times, and it is so fun. So the first thing that I'm going to do is knit 1 stitch and then purl 1 stitch. And now I'm going to go down my yarn and I'm going to grab the first bead, which happens to be a bugle bead. So that is why the pattern says SL1 capital B, because the capital B is for the bugle bead. And now what you're going to do is slip 3 stitches, and then you are going to not have sweaty hands here. The first row, I would say, of this pattern is the hardest to work when you're getting into those tight stitches at the beginning. Now you're going to purl 1. You've got that bead slipped up right there. You're going to wrap your yarn around, and then you're going to purl that stitch, and then you are going to bring your yarn to the back and knit your stitch. Once you get a little bit farther away from the teardrop, this gets easier to work. And now I am going to slip the first stitch purlwise with yarn in front. I'm going to bring my yarn to the back, and knit the next stitch. And then I am going to purl the next 3 stitches. And again, it gets easier once you're away from that teardrop. And now I'm going to knit the next stitch. And I'm going to slip that last stitch purlwise with yarn in front. Now here's the good news, you guys. The wrong side row on Chillaxing Cheetah or version 1 is the same on every wrong side row. So once you have that down, easy to do. On the Chasing Cheetah, that is true for the slip bead sections, but not for when you're in the double-sided lace section. Okay, so let's continue on. I'll do 2 more rows with you just so you can get a feel of what this looks like. And then I'll go over a few things that are particular to the Chillaxing Cheetah and Chasing Cheetah patterns. I'm slipping up that bead right there. I am slipping the next 3 stitches purlwise. I am purling the next stitch, and I am knitting the last stitch. And that row already went more easy. I should not have said that. There we go. And now I'm going to turn my work and work that wrong side row just like we work it, where I slip the first stitch purlwise, bring my yarn to the back, and then I am going to knit 1, purl 3, knit 1, and then slip that last stitch. One of the things I really love about this yarn is it doesn't split easily. It's really beautiful to work with. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So that is how you work those first 6 rows. You're going to work 2 more rows exactly the same way you did, and then you are going to continue on with the pattern. So let's jump ahead and I'll talk to you a little bit about Chillaxing Cheetah. Okay, just a tiny bit more about Chillaxing Cheetah. I've actually already shown you everything you need to know, and I talked to you in the gauge section about sizing and how you will make a decision about how long to make your necklace when you get beyond the beading section and you work those plain rows. So if we look at Chillaxing Cheetah under the camera, you'll see that you start with that left strand and you work your beading when you get to the sections that say, slip 5 A beads, you'll be slipping those up and then just working the undulating pattern. And when you are done with the beadwork, you'll just be working plain rows. And what I would suggest to do, and this is true for both of the patterns, is before you finish things off and go to sew on your clasp, I would stop and block and make sure that you like the length of your collar. And then I give you some finishing rows for finishing up your strand and then sewing on your clasp. So I would kind of like wait and make sure you like the length by blocking it and seeing what the weight of the pendant does before you do those final rows and make that decision for your length. So after you have worked the left strand, you're going to go on to the right strand, and is worked exactly the same as the left strand. The only difference is that when you go to cast on the stitches, you'll have that point of the teardrop pointing to the right instead of pointing to the left. And then when you work up, I believe there's a little bit of a difference in these stitches so that the collar kind of bends around your neck nicely. And those are kind of little things that I do in patterns when I'm thinking about your anatomy, and that matters even if it's a necklace, not just if you're working on a sweater or another garment. So that's pretty much any little extra detail about Chillaxing Cheetah. Again, this is all written out in the pattern. When I do these video tutorials, it's just to show you those tricksy bits, like that cast on, which I think you really needed to see to be able to do. So let's talk about Chasing Cheetah next, which is a little bit more challenging and tons of fun, in my opinion. Okay. So the biggest difference with Chasing Cheetah or version 2 is that after you've worked those first 6 rows, and then you'll see there's 2 more rows that you're going to work plain, and I'll show that to you on the needle in a second, you are jumping right in with the Chillow lace chart. If any of you have ever knit one of my designs, Undulating Waves, this will look somewhat familiar to you, but it is just an 8-row repeat and you only have 7 stitches on your needles. So if you really want to get this and it's challenging you with these small needles and small yarn, go ahead and grab some big yarn and big needles and try it even without any beads on it, just to get into the flow of it, and then maybe try it with some bigger yarn and some bigger beads, and then come back to your needles and maybe things will click. But what I want to do with you is talk about reading this chart a little bit, talk about what's happening with the beads, and then I'm going to show it to you on your needles. But what I want to make sure that you know is I also give you the written instructions for this chart. So if you are somebody who loves working from written instructions and is not a lover of a chart, I give you the written instructions as well. Personally, I love working from charts and my eyes swim when I read written instructions. So if you look at a chart, every square represents a stitch. And what is fun about this lace chart, it is double-sided lace. So lace stitches are worked on right side and wrong side rows. So if a blank square on a right side row is a knit stitch, that same square on a wrong side row is a purl stitch. And sometimes that trips people up a little bit, but we'll read through it together just for a few rows to make sure you get it. So this first stitch right here is a knit stitch. This is a right side row. You start with the row 1 and you're going to be reading from the right to the left. So we've got a knit 1, we've got a yarn over with 3 beads, we've got a knit 1, 2, 3. That right there is a knit 2 together on a right side row, and then we've got a knit 1, and that is row 1. Row 2, that little dash right there is a slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. A right leaning decrease on a wrong side row is a purl 2 together. And then we have purl 2 because we're on the wrong side. And then we've got a yarn over with 2 beads. And this is an interesting square. It's fuchsia, which says beads to front, and it is also a knit stitch. So sorry, we're on a wrong side row. It's a purl stitch. So you're going to purl 1 with beads to front, and I will show that to you on my needles. And then you're going to slip that last stitch purlwise with yarn and front. Now, if we went on to read this, we would be knitting 3. That third stitch says beads to back. What that is the beads on the yarn over from the previous row. You'll see what I mean once we're on our needles. And now we're going to yarn over with 1 bead, and then we're going to knit 1, and then we're going to knit 2 together, and then we're going to knit 1. Remember that all of that is written out for you right here. If it is easier to work from the written instructions for this than to read the chart with all of that information. So let's knit that together. I love knitting this so much. I'm all excited to knit it again. So I have on my teardrop and needles right here, the first 8 rows worked. I've got those first 6 rows worked with the beads, and then I've got the 2 rows worked plain without beads as written in your pattern. And now I am going to start with the Chillow lace chart, and I've got my beads pre-strung on my yarn, and I'm just going to go get 3 and have them kind of ready to go there for when I need them for working with them. And now I am going to knit the first stitch, and the next stitch is a yarn over with 3 beads. So I'm going to go get those 3 beads, slide them up so they're touching the right hand needle, and I'm going to make a yarn over. And you can see those beads are just sitting on that yarn over on my right hand needle. And now I'm going to knit 3. And now I am going to knit 2 together. and then I'm going to knit 1. And that is row 1. Now when we come to that symbol with the fuchsia box, that's referring to these beads that I have on the yarn over from row 1. So I'm going to flip my work around, and now I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in front. That next stitch is a purl 2 together. And now I am going to purl 2. And I'm going to make a yarn over with 2 beads. So I'm going to go down my yarn. Making a yarn over with beads is easy. Slide up those beads, make a yarn over my needle. And now I've got those 3 beads right there. And do you see how these beads can either be to the back of that needle or to the front of that needle? If I've got a fuchsia box, think fuchsia front. And we're talking about front of needle, not right side, wrong side of work. So you're just coming to the front of that needle, and then I'm going to go ahead and I am going to purl over those beads so that those beads land perfectly in place right there. And then I'm going to slip the last stitch purlwise. And now I'm going to turn my work, and I am going to knit 3. And then I'm going to do a yarn over with 1 bead. And this concept is the same once you get the hang of it. And, oh, do you know what I did? I'm so used to doing this that I didn't really go over the bead to back thing. So on that 3rd knit stitch, these beads right here, which are the yarn over from the previous row, they want to go all the way to the back right there. So when I go to knit into that stitch, they're stacking beautifully with the beads from the row below there. And now I'm going to make a yarn over with 1 bead. And then I'm going to knit 1. And I am going to knit 2 together. And then I'm going to knit 1. And now I'm on row 4. And you'll see on row 4 that you have a yarn over that does not have a bead on it. So I'm going to slip the first stitch. I'm going to purl 2. I'm going to make a yarn over. Now this next purl stitch, that bead is to the front. I'm going to make sure it's all the way to the front. It basically, you want to line it up so it's lining up with the other beads, so they're making that nice little row right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and purl over it. And then I am going to purl to the last stitch and slip that last stitch purlwise with yarn in front. And now I'm on row 5. And row 5 is a little different. And the only thing that's different about rows 5 through 8 is that my wave is going back in the other direction. So this symbol right here is a slip, slip, knit on right side rows and a purl 2 together on wrong side rows. So I'm going to work rows 5 and 6 with you just because they're a little bit different, and I want you to see how to do those stitches. And then you will have all the skills that you need to knit this Chillow lace chart. So one thing that I will say about these videos is you can slow things down if you want to watch me do something slower, and you can also speed it up if you want me to do it faster. So the first thing I'm going to do is knit the first stitch, and now I'm going to slip, slip, knit. So I'm going to slip the first stitch knitwise. I'm going to slip the second stitch knitwise. And I am going to work those 2 stitches together. And now I'm going to knit 3. And then I'm going to make a yarn over with 3 beads. And I didn't have to worry about a bead from the previous row on this row because we just did a plain yarn over on row 4. And then I'm knitting the last stitch. So now I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to work row 6, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of yarn here so that I'm ready to go. I'm going to slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to purl the next stitch, but that has a blue box. So that means beads to back, which my beads are right there to the back of the needle. I'm going to purl that stitch. I am going to yarn over with 2 beads. And now I am going to purl 2, and then the purl 2 together through the back loop. What that does is make a left leaning decrease on the right side of your work. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go into the back of the second stitch and the back of the first stitch, just like that. Jam my needle through, wrap my yarn around, and pull it through. And that is a purl 2 together through the back loop. And then I am going to slip that last stitch purlwise with yarn in front and turn my work. So you can see if I kind of open things up a bit that my wave is starting to come back in the opposite direction. I think it's helpful at this point to go grab the finished necklace so you can look and see how those waves looked once they're blocked. Lace does not look great until it is blocked. So I highly suggest when you are done with this necklace, before you go to sew on the clasp, that you stop and block it. And while it's wet, you're going to want to pull things out a little bit. And I'm going to talk about that in this last finishing section. Okay, so you've finished your Chillow and it is time to block it. Blocking is very important with this design. It really isn't going to look good until it's blocked. When it is wet, let me kind of get this other one out of the way here. When it is wet, whether you are working Chillaxing Cheetah or Chasing Cheetah, what you want to do is, while your stitches are very wet and you've soaked this in some warm water, you want to just kind of pull out a little bit on each side of those bugle beads so that when it dries, that wave is really pronounced. It won't look as good until it's blocked. So take that moment to kind of pull it out and then lay it flat to let it dry. Exactly the same thing is true with the Chasing Cheetah, perhaps even more so. So with this lace, you really want to make sure that you're opening up those waves. It'll be kind of like long and narrow, almost like that. So while it's blocking, make sure you pull out. You'll make these a little bit shorter as you do that. And what that will do is really like highlight the lace stitches so that these beads all can lay flat comfortably on their stitches. So I highly suggest doing that last step. And then when it's dry, you'll finish it off. And when you go to sew on your clasp, you'll just sew the clasp on to the back of that unbeaded strand with the tail that you have left from finishing things off. And you will sew it onto both ends and then go ahead and get to wear it with pride and hope somebody doesn't steal it from you, because I have a feeling that is going to happen with these Chillows. I would like to acknowledge that I should have sewn a tunic with cheetahs on it, and that I'm never going to forgive myself for thinking of that while I was making this video, that I missed a wardrobe opportunity. I could have had cheetahs back here on the set. You know, next time I'll do better, okay? Thank you so much for watching. Please do ask any questions below. I am always happy to help. I will make sure to give you links to things that I talked about below. You can jump ahead to different parts of this tutorial should you need to. We'll give you timestamps below in the notes for that as well. So enjoy your Chillows and thank you so much. Happy knitting.